Welcome to a solo Rust adventure.
Oh wait, sorry. Wrong game. Hold on, let me fix that. Welcome to Last Oasis, a solos guide. As the Season 6 test starts to wrap up, I put together a load of information as how to play Last Oasis solo, as there's currently just no good information on how to play the game solo, or in a duo. So, I used my 5,000 hours of gameplay experience to tell you how it's possible to thrive against the dangers of Last Oasis, or just LO for short. So, where to begin? We're going to break this down into three main parts: the early game, the mid game, and the end game, and try to give you tips and tricks on how to be successful in each stage of the game. Alright, let's begin.
Ruby's fucking head.
I'm going to go off the assumption you have some basic knowledge of the game, as this isn't a complete noob guide. But if you'd like to see a complete noob guide or new player experience, please let me know in the comments. The early game is going to consist of two primary maps, the cradle and the meaty map. Past seasons you can skip the cradle and go straight to the meaty map. However, this playtest had players living on the cradle for the first day or so of the wipe. So I'm going to assume this holds true for the official launch of Season 6 as well. The wipe drops. Everyone's starting in the cradle. It's chaos everywhere. What do you do first? Well, that really depends. Can you hold your own in PvP? Or are you just a humble farmer living your best farm life? If you don't really have the skill set to take those early game wins against other players, here's what you can do to help prevent some of those losses. This is perhaps my biggest tip that applies to all stages of the game as a solo. Asset loss prevention. You're going to lose fights. You're going to lose ships, you're going to lose kits, base could be raided, and sometimes you might even just lose your sanity over it. Applying this basic rule can help mitigate a lot of the loss you can take early on in the game and later in the game. So here's how you do it. Step 1. Rush the spider. I give you the Spider Walker. This little devil early game is going to be your best friend. Given the cheap cost of the spider, you can build one almost right away. So make sure you allocate enough points while leveling early on, because your knowledge point distribution is extremely tight in the early game. Also, get the medium armored legs. They're a lot tankier. You can't grief them, and they're about the same price, so just get the medium legs. Since tablets are no longer a thing, all tech is level based now instead of research based. The reason I say to rush the spider in the early game is one of the biggest mistakes I see new players make is leaving everything they own in their inventories as they play. So that means one gank and you are completely wiped out. Instead, use the spider to keep your critical tools and resources in the cargo as you move from resource to resource. I know it's tedious, but it will save you a lot of time in the end. Now the next decision you gotta make is whether you want to live out at the trade station or do you want to live out of your own base. If you decide to make your own base, you have two options, sand or wood. You're going to choose sand. Why? Because it's solid. And solid isn't raidable anymore in the cradle. It's not raidable because the meteors no longer drop meteor cores, which you need to make charged boulders. So with no access to those in the cradle, the only way to get raided is by building a wood base. You don't want to build a wood base because you can break it down with scattershot. Scattershot is reinforced, so it's going to be able to crack those early game wood structures. So we're going to build sand to start with. And the other option, the trade station. In the current version of the game, granted it isn't patched after this video, is probably the safest overall option for solo players. Why? Well, you have a 6-hour window where you can build on your ships, craft materials, load out warships, and about the only thing you really can't do is build new ships. And lastly, you have one free slot in the packer function, so it's pretty insanely OP for a solo player. What I recommend, after your spider, your initial sand base, get a dinghy going, park it at trade. Use this for all your juicy storage and for your crafting. Then you can use your sand base as a fob to farm out of transferring materials to trade periodically. This way, if you ever get hit, you have enough to reset at any time. Now we're looking to get out of the cradle, but we need levels. Power level in the cradle. Take your spider to one of these locations in the cradle. Unlock the Jaggertooth and Sawtooth here in your tech tree. These items you can craft on the go as you farm these Rupu camps, so this will allow you to speed run these camps for the maximum amount of XP. These Rupus tend to drop enough fiber and ash to kind of create bandages on the go, but if you don't get enough, you can also just plop down a campfire to burn some wood. Using this method is one of the fastest ways I've found in the cradle to gain experience, so take advantage of it. Also, you don't need to collect all the items and run them back. If you're speed leveling, just collect enough as you go to carry on you, and make weapons, and keep grinding that XP. Materials at this point aren't as big of a deal as soon as we have our sand fob and crafting walker at trade, because once we hit level 15, we are ready to leave the cradle and move on to the medium map, since this is the level that unlocks stone bases and the baling walker. And this becomes our next fob goal. Without going into too much detail, for stone bases you need tree sap. You get tree sap from redwood, and you get redwoods from these valleys here. I would also place your fob in one of these valleys to farm cattail. Just choose one where a group hasn't settled if possible. If you can't find one, you're going to have to use your grappling skills to get in and out of those cattail areas without being seen. If you would like to see a full grappling and wingsuit guide, please let me know in the comments. Also, level 15, the toboggan is unlocked, or just Tobo for short. I would get this up and running at trade as soon as possible to replace the dinghy. On the Tobo, you can place multiple vault stations as well as crafting stations. This means you can fully operate and craft everything you need in the trade station from this point on. And again, just like in the cradle, we use the fob just to farm out of and transfer everything to trade as we fill up the base. Because in medium maps, meteors are going to drop meteor cores again, meaning your stone fob is vulnerable to being raided. So this is a way to prevent a big loss if your fob gets hit. In summary, use the spider early on to farm. Make sure you put your tools away while not actively using them. Get sand bases as fobs for resource gathering, but rely more on trade to fully secure your loot. Once you get to the meaty maps, rush the stone baling base, which means you might have to set up another sand base temporarily. Once you get that up, get up a Tobo as soon as possible, and get that moved to trade. This is going to secure the bulk of your wealth. You may have noticed I haven't touched on quality gathering yet. I plan to cover that here with the push from the medium bow map tech to ceramic, since quality is going to be the next big hurdle outside ceramic. Ceramic's going to be tough to get at this stage of the game because you have to compete for the meteors on the medium maps to get ceramic before the clay maps can drop. If you're able to secure it early on, do it, but don't risk your boat over it. I'm not going to cover greatly quality maps except how to remain low-key on these maps. You should fully expect on these maps that any group that catches you is going to crack your boat, since these are event tiles. With that expectation in mind, here's what I suggest you do to farm on event maps low-key. For event maps as a solo, I suggest either a throwaway dinghy or mollusk walker with some small wings. I'll cover both walkers here a little and why each is suited for the job. So first the dinghy. A dinghy with small wings has an extremely low profile. The trick is to tuck this walker into a crevasse and some rocks or some trees, basically trying to break any line of sight another nomad may have while riding by. Personally, I believe the dinghy with small wings is better suited at getting in and out of the event tiles on medium maps than the molly is, but I'll go over the molly as well. The mollusk, my personal favorite walker, with small wings also has a pretty slim profile, which is why we use it over some of the other wing type. The only disadvantage is the speed versus say like a medium type of wing. Using the same strat as the dinghy, we kind of want to find an elevated location with a density of trees to tuck our walker into. With the small wings, you can usually hide your walker nose first into the trees and have a pretty good chance not to have anyone spot you. The same farming strategy takes place for the hard maps as well. You can either take a few of these spades here and wingsuit around for the clay spots, or just carry the materials for an extractor. Remember though, you can't unpack an extractor from a walker, it has to be crafted on site. So bring about 1 to 2k torque with you, a boatload of ash, usually around 1 to 3k, and the materials you need for the extractor. This much ash should yield you around 700 to 800 clay. Here I suggest you find a spot close to where you hid your walker and take multiple trips back and forth so you don't go overweight. It's also good to remember that these event maps have a rapid production rate, so it won't take long to burn through one extractor full of ash. 700 to 800 clay should last you a fairly long time. Or the other method is, if you don't have the materials ready to drop an extractor, just bring about 6 to 8 of those tubes I showed you, and that should yield you close to about 200 to 300 clay.
I'm in danger!
Alright, so with clay and ceramic taken care of, the next big hurdle on the stage we can talk about is chitin. During my initial solo run, chitin was a real pain to get. Thankfully, after some feedback and some patches, it's not nearly the pain as it used to be, which is much more solo friendly now. Should at this point get out of your mind about killing the crab. Once these maps first drop, everyone needs chitin to progress their tech. Instead, focus on getting a scythe made from the previous clay runs, or at least a bone sickle, and farm insects at the cattail ponds here instead. Just be cautious of other players in the frog. I recommend sticking to the edges of the pond as you farm insects so you can quickly grapple away if needed. Just need a few runs of this to get your tech up. We're not aiming to get overabundance of chitin right now because these maps are going to be very hot when they first drop. Once lava canyon maps drop, those cattail ponds also will have insects in them. So similar to the medium maps, try and find a pond to settle on or live near that you can rat down into the ponds and get the bugs you need. This could be a little bit more legwork initially, but this will get you what you need to start, at least until the clay maps slow down or spire tiles come out. The goal you should be shooting for initially with your chitin is the lathe and tusker. I'll cover the obsidian for the lathe in a moment. The tusker is going to replace your towbow as your main storage and crafting walker. This monster has more than enough storage for a solo's bank, so make sure you get the tusker up and going as soon as you get the chitin you need for it. I foresee two situations when it comes to obsidian. If you have had luck grabbing meteors, you have a small stash of obsidian needed for tech. Or you've had no luck and no obsidian. Well, either way, it's time to mass farm obsidian. Unfortunately, the best method to get a mass of obsidian is with a hose, but that method isn't exactly solo friendly. So we're going to skip that for now. There are 4 main ways to get obsidian, all which require some form of ceramic tools outside of meteor cores. They are, well, meteor cores, the obsidian shards that fall off of meteor cores, farming the geysers on lava event maps, and killing the frog and harvesting it with a ceramic axe. I'm going to skip 1 because it's pretty obvious by this point. For 2, after a long and hard testing process, I concluded that you can't use bone picks on obsidian shards. For 3, you can rat farm these if needed. These shards drop a massive amount of stone though, so just be aware. So if you need stone, it's a good time to collect it, otherwise you're just going to have to keep dropping it. For 4, the best way I can say to farm the frog is probably on a solo gun pod, or like on your molly for instance. The frog won't target you about half the time it shoots its poison at you, so even in the gas it isn't that dangerous, but it's also good you can bring like a gas mask. I'll cover this part quickly. Now that we have the lathe and some ceramic and obsidian to play with, we can make better tier weapons. I suggest either the Firestone Bludgeon or the Kopesh. The Mount Blade isn't a bad alternative either if you still have an excess of ceramic at this point, but if you prefer something like a 2-hand blade, the Sling Blade is also a good option. Now if you have to choose between the Kopesh and the Bludgeon, I would suggest the Bludgeon as it seems to be the most meta weapon right now. For armor, I'll just go over what the meta is real quick. It's going to be the Carapace gloves and boots with the redwood chest piece, but the Brittlebone set is also a good alternative at this stage as well. You ought to be around level 45 to 60 at this point if you started fresh at the wipe. For stat distribution, it's mostly a preference, but I suggest at least getting 10 mobbing. And the last thing I'll cover in this phase is the base upgrades. Once you have enough obsidian, upgrade to the Siler for your new fob. In summary, utilize the smaller profile of the dinghy and the molly to help you farm quality and gather clay. The chitin grind will start slow, but should pick up more in the later game. Make sure you do save what you need early on though for your tech upgrades, such as the lathe and the Tusker Walker. Massing obsidian will unlock your next tier weapons and the Siler. This will increase your survivability and your farming capability. And a small brief overview on the current meta kits at this stage in the game. Alright.
Brief interlog before discussing part 3 for some best practices. Use cotton and earthwax for Nomad. It is vastly superior to cattail bone glue. You can collect the beeswax from trees and throw it in the stomper. For 1 beeswax, it's 5 earthwax, so that's a pretty insane conversion rate. You can get cotton early on at the lava tiles or at the vent maps. The tool pod is an absolute must. Long blade if you can pull it off. You can almost put this on any walker at this stage in the game. And it doesn't matter what walker you put it on, it's mostly just a preference at this point. It's whatever walker you feel most comfortable with farming. And you can supplement that by having advanced windmills. The advanced windmills have 3K torque capability and are absolutely cracked. And last thing, this may be a controversial take, but as a solo, I suggest living on a 12 to 25 cap tile, away from the smaller caps. Larger clans don't really bother with solos and casuals for the most part, and if they own the tile, they're much more likely to help you than they are to attack you. Just my experience as a solo living on a larger cap tile. So just something to think about. Alright, we're in the in-game. So the bad news first. Not all the in-game content has been released yet, unfortunately, in the test, such as the worm. So I can only cover what's been covered so far that entails or matters to us as a solo. The parts that I can cover in the in-game are maps like the Spire and Iron Sights. So I'll cover those at this stage of tech. You remember that stone baling fob you had? The one before you upgraded your Siler? Well, I hope you didn't completely gut it, because now that we're on the Spire maps, we can use this to farm the crab and the go-go. The go-go's could be a little bit tougher out of the two, but it doesn't matter that much. So we're going to modify the fob to look sort of like this picture here. As you notice, the skirt around it help protect the crab from getting too close. Make sure you pack enough ceramic rooks and tools to appropriately farm the crab. Now, the only difference for the go-go is 1, it can shoot at you, and 2, you need a saw for it. So put one of the large walkers in your fob like this, with a walker with a saw in it. That way you can quickly drop your walker with the saw and then farm the go-go, because we need shadrock for the advanced furnace. To cover the advanced furnace a bit, it's kind of a beast requirement. Even after it got nerfed from needing hollow bone from a Koa, it's still quite demanding as a solo. So for starters, you need 25 iron gears, which equates to about 250 iron ore. I know in my solo run, that's nearly the entire cap of what I collected up to that point.
Which means you need a lot of iron to produce iron bars. The 3 best ways you can get iron now that I found are meteor cores in the Spire maps, Spire towers, which aren't great, but they're pretty consistent at least, and the iron maps. The first one again is pretty obvious. Number 2 though takes a little bit more legwork to get vast amounts of iron, and isn't really the most efficient way if you're trying to do large cokes of iron. But it's a good way to get iron, at least outside the iron maps and meteor cores. Now the iron map is going to be insane when it first drops. So if your only goal is to get iron, the first few maps are going to be really rough, because these maps are going to be flooded with players. If you're okay with that risk, here's a strategy I suggest to maximize your loot runs. Find a good spot to place your walker. Depending on the cap size, clans are going to come in force to contest for the iron. Farm the outside ring here and avoid the center. The edges have a lot of iron. It's just more spread out than the center. The center is very dense in iron, but that's where most groups go initially. They bypass the edges. So hitting the edges first can yield you the most iron. So while you're running the edges, hit the nodes until you're almost full of weight. Don't go overweight, because these maps aren't the best for grappling points. So get enough, run it back to your walker, and depot. Once you get enough, don't overstay your welcome. Once you get the sense the map is depleted on iron, that's a good time to leave. Now, if you want to stay for content or PvP, go nuts. But if you're just there to gather iron, it's a good time to bail, because the iron's going to stay depleted until about the 20-minute mark on the tile. That's when it'll start respawning, so there's no need to stay on the map outside of getting your initial iron in the first few minutes. Spire maps are currently the only maps we can live on at this current stage in the playtest, so I'll cover that here, since the extent of what I can really cover that's left in the in-game isn't really out yet, i.e. the worm tiles. This is pretty much what's left that I can cover for the remainder of this video for the most part. So, outside the performance of the server, Spire tiles are pretty great. You have the go-go here, which you need for the advanced furnace. You have the crab here for chin, a frog for spearmint and gelatinous glue, iron in the spires, lightwood literally everywhere, and clay in the geyser pits. So for a solo, this is almost a wet dream of resources, because everything's almost bundled here, with the exception of the eucalyptus leaves, which you need to get from the koa on the iron tile, which as a solo early on isn't happening anyway. By this point, if you followed the tips of asset loss prevention, you should have more than enough to play with some of the larger ships and in-game boats. With the advanced furnace up and a steady way to farm all the materials, it's pretty much now up to you to decide your fate and how you want to play the game. I'll look into smaller segments on the worm tiles if they drop for the next playtest or the season, but with the black cess not accessible right now, and a lot of the advanced armors not accessible, there's really not much more I can cover at this point. All the information I gathered was from playing the actual playtest as a solo myself. Things I did not cover due to lack of content or information, or they just need their own more extensive video. Those were PvP mechanics, grappling and wingsuiting tips, walker setups like PvP builds versus a farming build, base design tips, and the upgrade of quality. If you'd like to see any videos on that in the future, just make sure you let me know in the comments.